We're teaching through the biblical book of Acts. Today, the back half of chapter 17, great passage. In Acts chapter 17, Paul, he goes to a college town. How can you tell if a town is a college town? Well, if you go to the store and you see this, ramen noodle sale, that's a college town. College, where a square meal is a pizza box. College, where the most encouraging words are, I haven't started the assignment either. Well, college town. The name of the college town that Paul went to, it wasn't Ames, it wasn't Iowa City, it was this. Verse 16. Well, Paul was waiting for them in Athens. Athens was the intellectual center of the ancient world, the home of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and the rest. Acts 17 tells us this, verse 21, all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Sounds a lot like a college campus. We might assume that such a cerebral town had no place for religion, but just the opposite was true. Verse 16, while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. Everybody has idols. We all have gods, whether it's Jesus or naturalism or empiricism or pleasure. We all have things that we look to provide meaning and direction in life. Well, as Paul was starting to talk to these Athenians about Jesus, two primary groups of intellectual objectors rose up. Verse 18. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. Well, I want to unpack the Epicureans and the Stoics so you kind of know who these people are a little bit. The Epicureans. This was a group of philosophers. They believed that there are many gods, but these gods are distant and they're far away and they're uninvolved. And so they said, well, they don't care about me and they don't care about you. They don't care about this world. So might as well just live it up. Might as well just get all the pleasure that you can because there is no deeper purpose. That's the Epicureans. Now, the Stoics, they were a little different. They were pantheists, which means they believed everything is God and God is everything. They'd say things like, you are God and I am God and the sun is God and the moon is God, the river is God, the bird is God. You may be thinking, sounds like New Age spirituality isn't all that new. You got it. Same thing here with these Stoics. And what the Stoics did is they applied that philosophy to concentrating on pure reason. So they said, let go, release emotions, and embrace intellect. So when you think of these two groups, Epicureans, think this, think frat boy, always looking for a party. When you think Stoics, get this picture in your mind. It's Spock. That's the Stoic. And, I look at that and think, man, that is one bad prop, right? It looks like he's got a glue gun. But I digress. The passage continues, verse 18. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. Some of them asked, what is this babbler trying to say? Babbler, not a compliment. And actually, babbler, in the first century, it was a reference to a bird, certain bird that picked up seeds and then spit those seeds right back out. See, a babbler was a person who picked up ideas from other people and used them without really understanding them. The point? Well, these people, they were accusing Paul of having an inferior mind. They were saying things like, well, Paul, you base your beliefs on faith, not us. We base our beliefs on reason and logic. Next verse. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting at the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting?" Well, that location, well, it's here. It's the Areopagus. You can still go there today. It's also called Mars Hill. It's where the Athenians went to philosophize and to discuss new ideas. What's going on here in Acts chapter 17? It's a test. The leading philosophers of the day, they were examining Christianity to determine if it had intellectual merit or if it was just some emotional fluff. Have you ever been in a situation like this one? Acts chapter 17, it's a really valuable passage. We can see here in this passage how Paul explained Christianity to the finest unbelieving intellects of his day. You say, well, how did Paul do that? And how can we? Well, are you familiar with these terms? Special revelation and general revelation. Special revelation, it refers to specific truths that God reveals through extraordinary means like the Bible. In special revelation is wonderful because through it God gives us specific and personal understanding about himself. Things like his name and his ways and his attributes and his character, like what Jesus did for us on the cross. Here's the downside of special revelation. Not everybody has access to it, and not everybody believes it. And so here's what God has done. He's provided another way for us to know him. There's special revelation. Well, there's also this second way, general revelation. General revelation, well, that is this way that God, it refers to him revealing himself to all people through creation. Things such as the physics, the laws of the universe, the complexity of the human body, the human longing for meaning, all of these kind of things point to him, point to the reality. Somebody designed this, somebody made this. That's general revelation. You know, when you're communicating, here's a real practical application for this. When you're communicating with someone who doesn't accept the Bible as God's special revelation, don't keep quoting Bible verses. We Christians love to do that. Love to throw out verse after verse after verse. Well, if they don't believe that the Bible is the real deal from God, don't keep throwing it at them. Rather, accept where they're at and lean into this. Change your strategy up. Lean into general revelation. See, that's what's happening here. That's what Paul is doing in this context. In Acts chapter 17, Paul, we're going to see he demonstrates the truth of Christianity to unbelieving skeptics, not using special revelation. He doesn't use a single Bible verse. Rather, he does it using only this, only general revelation. Great passage to see how Paul does this. Let's check it out. Next verse. Verse 22. Paul then stood up at the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious, for as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of this very thing you worship, and this is what I am going to proclaim to you." Check out how Paul starts. It's kind of important. Paul, he doesn't begin by insulting these people. He doesn't begin by attacking them. Rather, he begins by finding and establishing common ground. A good place to reflect and ask, well, that was what Paul did. Is that what I do? Is that my tendency? Do you tend to argue and fight, or to listen and understand? Do you tend to look for and establish and create, a common mutual foundation? Or do you tend to just bulldoze them to the ground? Bulldozing can be kind of fun, but it leaves a mess. See, Paul, here's what he did. He just spent a little time observing. He observed these people, he observed their lives, and then he found an area of agreement that he could use as a foundation and start building on. That foundation for Paul in this chapter, well, it was this altar they had to an unknown God. Paul, he didn't just go lambaste that. He didn't go take it down. He didn't go and take shots at all their false beliefs. Rather, look at his strategy. He notices this altar to an unknown God, and he says something like, hey, I know who that God is. Let me tell you about him. Paul, he leans into this general revelation, and then he goes on to show them and to show us a few things that we can learn about God from general revelation. Here's the first. Look at verse 24. He says, the God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by human hands. He's saying there is a creator of this universe. Say, well, how do you know that? If you're not sold on special revelation of the Bible, just check out general revelation and look up. How long has it been since you have looked at the stars? It's good for us. I'd encourage you sometime this week, once it stops snowing, take 5 minutes. Step outside at night and look up. You know, I did this a couple of nights ago. I was out in the country and I was far away from the city lights. I looked up. Unbelievable. It was like somebody plugged the stars in. This is our universe. Well, correction, this is a very small part of our universe. I mean, you've seen it, astronomers. They say that one galaxy can contain somewhere around 100 million stars. And then in the visible universe, there is an estimated 200 billion galaxies. 200 billion galaxies, each having around 100 million stars. How many stars is that? I don't have enough fingers. I can't count that high. Here's what that does when we look up. It gives us some perspective. We look up and think things like people have been thinking throughout all history. Where did all of this come from? It's not just me. I'm a part of something a lot bigger than me. What's the source of all of this? See, science, for a time, they used to claim that the universe was eternal. They don't do that anymore. They now recognize the universe did have a beginning, which implies there is something outside of the universe that must have got it going. Well, what? Who? Stanford cosmologist by the name of Bill Bryson conceded this: those are very close to religious questions. Darn tootin'. In the beginning, there was something. We call that something God. That's how the Bible starts. Chapter 1, verse 1 of Genesis, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, God. We can hear God speak every single night. He says, look up. I'm real, I'm big, and I'm here. Well, Paul continues, verse 25. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. He's saying God is God is autonomous. He's saying, God, he needs nothing from me. I need everything from him. I mean, without God, you would cease to exist. Without you, God would be just fine. God would still be God. You know, that's a different view of God than the view of God in popular culture. Common belief by those who believe in God is that, well, this God, he must exist for me, to help me, to bless me, to guide me, to make me happy, and to give me things I want in life. God doesn't exist to serve me. I exist to serve him, to give him honor, to give him glory, to give him praise. God owes me nothing. Right? Everything that I get is gift. Paul continues, verse 26. It says, from one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. He's saying God is involved in the history of humanity. He's not remote or removed. He's not distant or detached. God gets involved in the affairs of humanity. Well, here's another thing that we can understand about God through general revelation. Let me get at it this way. This is Grandma Helen. She loves Jesus, helps her neighbors, makes a mean apple dumpling. Well, help me out here. So I want to see some hands. How many of you would say it would be wrong to throw sweet Grandma Helen out in front of a moving train? Hands. How many people say that's wrong? Yeah, right. Everybody. Why? Why? Here's why. Because there are some things that all of us, we just intuitively know, well, that's wrong. That's evil. And so we should ask, well, where does that come from? Where does that sense of evil, where does it come from? Who defines what is good? Who defines what is bad? Who defines what's right and what's wrong? What's the source? What's the basis? See, the existence of a universal good and evil, well, that points to the existence of a standard of good and evil, a transcendent lawgiver, God. Well, one more way that Paul establishes the rational credibility of Christianity to these intellectual skeptics in the city of Athens. Verse 31. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. This is cool. Most people today, think of the resurrection of Jesus as something that requires faith to believe. Paul, did you notice this? He actually flipped that to demonstrate the resurrection of Jesus is proof. The resurrection of Jesus is evidence that the Jesus movement is true. We say, how? How is the resurrection of Jesus proof of God and proof that Jesus is God? Well, there are a lot of ways. I'll just share one of them with you today. John chapter 19, verse 41 says this, at the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid. Because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. So where's the body of Jesus? After the crucifixion, the body of Jesus, it was placed in that tomb in Jerusalem. The disciples, they were first claiming resurrection right there in Jerusalem. A 2-minute walk, and any skeptic could confirm or deny that tomb was empty. No one in all of human history makes the claim, well, Jesus' body was still in the tomb. No one claims that. The opponents of the resurrection, they couldn't deny the obvious. Jesus' body, it wasn't there. So the story the opponents of the resurrection used is they said, well, it was the disciples. His body's not in the tomb, so it must have been the disciples. The disciples took the body. Well, what are the odds of that? Never mind the probability of breaking a Roman seal, moving a 2-ton stone, evading an elite Roman guard. It's one thing to steal a dead body. It's an entirely different thing to make that dead body appear alive again. I mean, this isn't Weekend at Bernie's. Some of you are too young to understand that. But I mean, think about this. That tomb, it was empty. History tells us that tomb of Jesus was empty. No shred of evidence has ever been discovered by literary sources, historical sources, or archaeological sources that can disprove the statement, Jesus of Nazareth was raised from the dead. More on that in 2 weeks. Well, Acts chapter 17. Paul, he turns up in a college town. The epics, or the Epicureans, and you got the Stoics, and the leading intellectuals and the brightest minds, they challenged Paul to see if Christianity had intellectual chops. And in defending the Christian faith, Paul, he didn't turn to the Bible because they didn't believe that. Rather, he turned to general revelation. 1, look up. Look at the stars. Where did it all come from? 2, good and evil. Which is which? What's the standard? 3, logic. If Jesus is dead, where's his body? Acts chapter 17. Paul demonstrates Christianity, it's not just a blind leap of faith. There is credible, logical evidence. God's fingerprints, they're all around when we simply pay attention. Let me close with this. The Old Testament prophet Isaiah, he had a vision of angels, and you know what these angels were saying? Isaiah 6, verse 3. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. They're talking about general revelation there. The whole earth is full of his glory. The whole earth is filled, it's drenched with the very presence of God. According to a Christian worldview, God, he's not someplace else. God is right here in this place. He created for all of creation to display his existence. We look around, a beautiful rose, a glorious sunset, the song of a bird. All of these things are designed and meant to proclaim God's presence here in this world. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. You know, one of my favorite definitions of spiritual growth is this. Spiritual growth is becoming more aware of God's presence. I like that. No matter how great your problem is, no matter how raw your pain, no matter how alone you may seem, God is there because God is here. So I'm going to invite us to close this way. Let's just take this moment and go ahead and close your eyes. And let this be a moment together, a moment of reflection, a moment of contemplation, a moment of listening, a moment where we become aware of God's presence here, right now.